Hi, I'm Brianna. I'm a homeschool mom, and over the last couple of weeks, I've had several friends contact me with questions regarding homeschooling. Those questions seem to have gone from why do you homeschool to how do you homeschool? And normally, over the course of the years, when someone asked me how we homeschooled, it was pretty easy to answer because I could just have them come over, make a cup of tea, and just go through things. But that's not possible right now. So I thought the easiest way to address what we use and how we use it was to make a video. I've never done this before, so we'll see how it goes. For those of you who don't know us, we have 4 kids. They are 3, 6, 8, and 11. Our older two have summer birthdays, so next year we will have a little one, a first grader, fourth grader, and seventh grader. So what we're doing, I would say, is probably sufficient for anywhere from kindergarten to 8th grade. But of course, adapt it to your own family however you wish, or just chuck it. But yeah, so here's what we do. We use a classical spine. It's by a company called Claritas. If you're familiar with classical conversations, it's a similar setup. In fact, it was written by some former CC moms, but and we've done CC, loved it. I don't have anything negative to say about it, but Claritas just works better for us. It is 4 cycles. Each cycle is 1 year. So you do 1 cycle per year, and then you repeat it, and you go deeper. And that's kind of a really rudimentary understanding of the classical model. Each cycle has 28 weeks, and each week has 7 academic memory work or topics. So each week has an English grammar, mathematics, science, history, geography, Latin, and then what they call a timeline. So it's sort of like a second bit of history. Timeline is repeated, the same timeline is repeated year after year. And because Claritas is a Christian-based program, it does start at creation. It doesn't define what that is or when that was, but it goes from creation through 9/11. And so this is the Claritas Cycle 3 Memory Work Guide. And if you were to do Claritas, you would need a memory work guide, just a cycle. You just have to pick a cycle. A lot of times people ask if they have to start at Cycle 1, and you don't. We did, just because Cycle 1 encompasses ancient history, and that's what my kids wanted to learn. And it had been a while since we'd studied ancient history, so when we jumped in at Cycle 1. Next year we will be doing Cycle 3, and that history is the Dutch Revolt to the Gold Rush. So, should be fun. Let me see here. Okay, how we do it. Well, here, let me show you. Each week has a 2-page spread. This is what it looks like. I think you can see it. So it has the English grammar, math, science. It also has a scripture and a hymn. I don't consider that academic. Some families do, but we do use it. So there's the history, the hymn, geography. Your geography memory work will always come with a map, a smaller map here, and then a larger map in the back. And then they also have Latin down here. If you don't speak Latin, don't worry. One of the best parts about Claritas is that every bit of their memory work, apart from timeline, has a song. So they make a song available for it. So you can purchase the CDs, or you can purchase them on flash drive. We actually have chosen a whole nother route. There's another company called Cross 7 that has a subscription service. I think it's $11 a month. And it allows you to, what they've done is they've taken all of the official Claritas Memory Work songs and put them to video. So when you, this isn't, the week 1 science is the scientific method. Okay, here we go. So week 2, it is matter. Matter is made from atoms. It takes up space and has mass. So they will have sort of infographics with it. And for history, they usually use like time appropriate paintings. And so if you have a visual learner, it does help a lot to have the Cross 7 subscription. One of the other things Cross 7 has, actually, while I'm speaking about it, is a link. They have a little box that says fun links, and so they've broken it down by week, and most of them are things like the Encyclopedia Britannica, National Geographic, or YouTube videos that line up with that week's memory work. So yeah, I really recommend Cross 7. All right, but how do we do it? So each week, we start our week on Mondays just because that works for us. Whatever day you choose to start on, what I would recommend is just either on a dry erase board or a chalkboard or whatever you have, write out that week's memory work, all of it. So you'll have your English grammar, you'll have your math, you'll have all of it on a board, and then you're going to address each piece of memory work 7 times. So for the 8 parts of speech, our family actually does a little chant. So it's noun, pronoun, verb, adverb, conjunction, interjection, preposition, adjective. My kids, even my 3-year-old knows that one because we do the 8 parts of speech every year. And so I will do that with them 7 times. And then we erase it from the board and we've moved on because that is what the day 1 of the week looks like. And I'll get into the rest of the week shortly. But so we do 7 times for each subject, and it sounds like a lot, but if you're doing the songs, most of the songs repeat each of the memory work pieces twice, and so you really just have to say it with the kids one time, like read it off the board once, and then play the song 3 times. But we don't always do songs because, to be totally honest, some of them are painful. And also, my son in particular, isn't a huge fan of them. He doesn't bulk too much at it at this point because he recognizes that it really does help you to remember it. And he knows that his sisters like them, so he's a good sport about it. But I try not to push the boundaries too much and do too many songs with him. So we also do games. As much as possible. With history especially, it's really easy to do games because the sentences are kind of longer. And so one of the big ones is I'll have it on the whiteboard. I'll have the sentence on the whiteboard, and I'll have all of the kids close their eyes, and I'll erase a word or a date. Usually the date, I've had my 3-year-old win the game because she knew the date. Because before I have them close their eyes, I read the sentence with them a couple of times, and I point at each word as I'm saying it. So even my new readers or my non-readers are able to kind of follow along a little bit. And so I erase the word, close their eyes, open their eyes, youngest to eldest. I always give, a couple of seconds extra in between them. Although it's getting less and less time because they're all getting too good at it. But they love that game. And so we just, I can erase 7 words really easily and go through a history sentence 7 times. Another game that we do is called Sparkle, which would work, it would work really well for geography. So that there's 5 pieces or 5 places in the first week's geography. It's Canadian provinces. And so I will do Sparkle, where we all stand in a circle. Usually the baby stands with me, and the first kid will say British Columbia, and then the next kid will say Alberta, and we'll go down the list, and I'll point to the board. And obviously the little ones, if they can't read it, I'll tell it to them because Saskatchewan is a big word. And when the last one says the last word, which for this memory work is Ontario, then the next kid says Sparkle, and they're safe, and the kid after them is out. And we go around and around and around until finally we have a winner. And so you end up saying the memory work quite a few times that way. And it's fun if you have a big family. If you have a singleton, if you have just one kiddo, God bless you, because homeschooling a single kid is a whole lot more difficult. But there are some games out there, and if you get onto Pinterest and you Google review games, there's some really fun options out there. One of them, actually, that I used with our son before our girls were old enough to do anything, was the Dollar Tree has these dice. They're like 3-inch cubes. And instead of actually having numbers and stuff on them, It's dry erase pads. And so I bought a pair of them, and on one of the die, one of the dice, one of the die, I put the subjects, and on the other one I would write the week, which works well when you're a few weeks into it, because then even if you're only 2 weeks into it, you could just write 1 2 1 2 1 2, and so they roll the die, and they have to find out if it's history week 1 or history or English week 5 or whatever, and then they have to answer what that is. It's a fun review game, and I'll get to the review stuff later, but most of the introduction games can also be used as review games. Okay, so yeah, I mean, it's pretty much that simple. So you introduce it, you go over it 7 times in whatever way you want. I mean, you could just do drill and repeat if you need to. With the maps or with the geography, it's really good to have an actual map, and Claritas does sell those. They actually sell these ones. They're much bigger than I thought. Like I hadn't looked at the sizing properly when I ordered the first ones, our first year we did Claritas, and I was really pleasantly surprised. So the maps are great in that they're double-sided. So for example, this map is used for week 15 and 16, and it's obviously so it's the canals and it's the trails. And so on one side we have all of the words, and on the other side they're not labeled. And so what I'll do is I will give my 3 and 6-year-old a map, and I will put it this side up with the words up, and I'll ask them to find something, and I'll tell them, look for Santa Fe Trail, and because they're early readers or not readers, I can say look for the Orange Trail or look for the S, and that works really great for them. But then with my older two, I'll give them their maps like this, and I'll say mark this trail with my 11-year-old, and I won't even tell him the name of it. I just want him to, after we've introduced it. I don't make him magically know it. I'll ask him to label it once we've already gone through it a couple of times. And then with my 8-year-old, I will give her a list of the trails, and I will tell her to put them on. And so it's just a little bit, you just adapt it. So you start with one, and then you go a little deeper each as they get older. Okay, so that is pretty much how we introduce everything when it comes to the memory work. And that usually takes about an hour on our first day, plus videos, because we did some videos last week, and it was from YouTube about Joan of Arc, and it ended up being an hour of just videos because it was a 5-part series, and they were, 11 or 12 minutes each. So you can fill the day pretty quickly with supplemental stuff, but the actual memory work will only take about an hour a day. So the first day you're going through each thing 7 times, and then the rest of the week you're reviewing. And what we do is, if we're on week 10, we'll go back to week 4. So we only go back 6 weeks before, and I don't do it 7 times when I'm doing review. I will go to the back of the book, because the back of the book has each subject broken down, has all of the memory work listed by subject. So it's kind of like that. So it's pretty helpful. And so I will just flip to there, and we'll go one subject by one subject. And I will go back 6 weeks. And usually when I've gone back 6 weeks, if we're on week 10, they've got week 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 down pretty well. 8 might be iffy. 9 is probably iffy, and I probably will have them do it twice. And then 10, because it's the new week, I usually will have them say it 2 or 3 times. But it's quick. Review days are quick for the family time, for the group time, at least for this portion of it. And then, the rest of the time is spent doing individual work. And so, like I said, you do need to supplement language arts, and you need to supplement mathematics. So for math, what we do is we use Saxon. I don't use a kindergarten curriculum at all. I just play games. We do number recognition. I use a 100 chart. I mean, the things kids like. So I will pull out a hundreds chart, and my little ones will count with me. And I wait until they can count to 100 on their own and have number recognition 1 through 100. And then I know they're good, because I know that they'll have their shapes and their colors, because we play games and they do puzzles and they have shapes and colors down pretty well. And as long as they have that, they're ready for Math 1. We use Saxon's Math 1, and then we do Math 2, and then we do Math 3. But then the way Saxon does it, they have a Math 4, but it's really kind of unnecessary, and because they have what they call Math 5-4. And so Math 5-4 is considered advanced 4th grade, or kind of a remedial 5th grade. If you've done Saxon Math 1, 2, and 3, you're absolutely ready for Math 5-4. And so we just jump into that. And when we go to Math 5-4, we use a program called Dive. It's a third-party program. It's online. It's called Dive into Math. It's not free, but it's so worth every penny. I do not have to teach math to my children. And as I love math, don't get me wrong, I do not love teaching it though. So Dive into Math is fantastic. And what he does is he takes the Saxon lessons and he comes up with his own practice problems. So even if you have a kiddo that has some struggles with the math problems that he's working on, and you have to be kind of a backup and go in and help him or her, you can use the practice examples that they have in their textbook. You don't have to come up with your own. And when you use the practice problems in their textbook, the answers are already in the solutions manual. So you don't have to come up with the problem. You don't have to come up with the solution. But I will say I've only had to do that twice, I think. I've only had to use the practice problems to help reinforce an issue. And that's with both of my older kids, 5-4 and above. So yeah, because my daughter is a little bit advanced in math, so she's already there. But it's so great because they have CDs you can get, or DVDs. Actually, I think they are CD-ROMs, so they will not work in a DVD player. I would recommend the streaming option, because the streaming option also has a Roku app. And so I just tell the kids, you need to do lesson 47, and they know how to pull up the Roku app and get into their math lesson, and he teaches the lesson, and then they go to their textbook and they know they need to do the mixed problems, and then I don't do anything. I don't even grade their lessons, honestly, because I don't have to. Saxon is an incredibly tightly wound spiral, and so what I do instead is every 10 lessons they have a quiz. Actually, every 5 lessons they have a quiz. I don't always make them do the quizzes because my kids are pretty strong in math, and so we haven't needed to like double check it as often. And so about every 10 lessons I do the test, and then I grade the test. And as long as they're maintaining a 90% or above, I don't even worry about grading their homework, because they get it. It's fine. They're good. I do check to make sure they did their homework, because that was a bit of an issue at one point. But, we all fall short of the glory, right? Anyway, so you need to supplement math. I highly recommend Saxon, but there are other great programs out there. And then you need to supplement language arts. So I'm going to start with the youngest. So for the little ones, we always start them with a book called Ordinary Parent's Guide to Teaching Reading. And it's not here. It's actually in the other room, so I can't show it to you. But it's a very thorough book. It's like 200 lessons. And it's pretty dry. But thankfully the lessons are short enough that I generally don't lose the kids. And we combine that with Explode the Code workbooks. which the kids love, especially when they're little. It's just so exciting. They get to do a workbook. And what we do is Explode the Code has primer books, and they have, so that's the ABC book. And what I always start with is I start with those three. I start with the ABC books. I think I have, no, I'm not going to get them. I start with the ABC books, and then I go to the Ordinary Parents Guide, and I teach the first 26 lessons of Ordinary Parents Guide, because those are the 26 letters. And so between the primers, the A, B, and C, and the first 26 lessons of Ordinary Parents Guide to Teaching Reading, they have the phonetic sound of each individual letter. And then we can start working on combining letters. And that's what book 1 does. So you can see book 1 actually is still individual letters also, but it works its way to simple words like cat and sat. And so it's great. And then you have 8 of these books. And I would say most kids can get through 2 to 3 books of these in a year. 2 is fine, 3 is great, it's fine. But if they have a problem, because going from book 3 to 4 in particular is quite a jump. Book 4 can be quite challenging for some students. They have half books. So if you finish a book, but you know that your kid had kind of a rough time of it, you can go back and get the half book. So if they struggled with book 4, but they finished it, you can get book 4 and a half before you move on to book 5. And it works great. When our kids finish Explode the Code and are ready for more of the grammar side of language arts, we have done several different things. But the thing that we've settled on is actually from Claritas also. So Claritas is great. We love it. So we start off, they have a few different things when it comes to grammar. Between 2nd and 4th grade, depending on when your child is ready for it, they can start with the level 1 of the lower grammar stage of fundamental grammar. So this is the fundamental grammar workbook for the lower grammar stage, and it's level 1. And the greatest thing about all of the Claritas grammar books is that they're well written. Definitely grammar geeks wrote them, but they're also so perfectly aligned with the memory work that it makes it really, really easy. So, for example, on week 2, we talk about the definition of nouns and pronouns. And so when my daughter, Elizabeth, she's the 8-year-old, did her week 2 of her grammar program, we had some oral questions, and then she had some copy work there, and then she had to take these sentences and she had to underline the nouns in each sentence below, and then she needed to go back and double underline the proper nouns. And so even though her memory work for week 2 didn't cover proper nouns, it took it to another step. It took it a step farther, and that was pretty helpful. So she did that. This is, like I said, 2nd to 4th grade, depending on where they're at with their reading level. This is a good one. And then they have, after that, and we haven't done it yet because she just finished that, they have the level 2 for the lower grammar stage, and this is appropriate for 3rd to 5th grade. And it's set up the same way. Still 28 weeks, still follows the memory work really, really well. So everything ties in together, and it's beautiful. But then some of the things that I really like about it are every once in a while they will have like a short poem that they'll need to memorize. And they'll throw in things that I would not have thought to do. And so I love it. Once they are past that, so once they're ready for closer to middle school grammar, they have what's called the Fundamental Grammar Guide and Workbooks. And it's considered both a middle school and a high school program because within the same books are 2 levels. And so you just go to the level that that child is comfortable with. And let me show you what you need to buy for that. So with that, you need to buy the Fundamental Grammar Guide to English Grammar. This is the teacher guide, this one right here. And so this is not cycle specific. So I used it this year with cycle 2, and I'm going to use it again next year with cycle 3. So it's fantastic. And then what you need to get next would be the student workbooks. And there are 2 of them. There is and they are cycle specific. So the student workbooks are cycle specific, but they have this one, which is the first one. It has units 1 and 2, and that's mostly the first semester stuff. This workbook with units 1 and 2 is consumable. So they write in it and they fill it up, and you have to buy another one. And it's fine for the next kid. But I wanted to kind of give you an example of the difference between the level 1 work and the level 2 work. All of the answers, BT dubs, are in the back. So if you're not a grammar geek and you're reading the teacher guide and you're just like, I don't know the answer, the answers are in the back, which I find super helpful. So with lesson 10, for example, sentence structures, my son, this is the answer guide just because I didn't, because it's easier to read than his handwriting. Level 1 needed to identify the following sentences as simple or compound. And so, if that makes sense. Okay. And then, but with level 2, they also needed to identify the sentence structure, but they needed to identify it as simple, compound, complex, or compound complex, which my son was not ready for that. He understood the difference between simple and compound, but he wasn't prepared. It was over his head to go into that level 2 stuff. There were other weeks that he was able to go into the level 2 stuff, and so we did. And that's one of the things I love about this program is how easy it is to adapt to what your child needs. So that's this one. That's the Units 1 and 2 student workbook. And it is cycle specific. The other workbook is called the Unit 3 workbook. It is also cycle specific, but it is not consumable. So I will, in 4 years, be able to use this student workbook again when we do cycle 2, and I will use it with probably, with 2 of my daughters then. Whew, that's a moment for me. Okay. Yeah, so what that is, the Unit 3 workbook is primarily dictation, diagramming, and parsing. And I'm just going to show you one of the lessons in here. So this is a lesson my son actually did not too long ago, and it was a great example because it ties in so well. Here we go. Sorry. All right. Here we go. Okay, so his history sentence that week for lesson 17, which this is what it is, and again, it lines up with the memory work. His history sentence that week was about the Ivans of Russia. So Ivan the Terrible and Ivan the Great, and we had a lot of fun with that one actually too. But what he ended up having to do was diagramming the sentence, Ivan the Terrible formed the secret police which wreaked havoc among the innocent. So he ended up diagramming it, and it walks you through how to help them diagram it, because if you haven't diagrammed sentences, I don't believe I was ever taught how to diagram. I do enjoy it, and I have picked it up before I started teaching it to him, but it wasn't something I was ever exposed to in school that I remember. And then you also do some parsing. So, and it also kind of explains how to do that as well. With the Unit 3, with this non-consumable cycle-specific book, I think there are 7 sentences per week to diagram and parse. And they are, again, linked back to the memory work. But they recommend that if you're only level 1, that you should only do like the first couple of sentences and just work on it a little bit at a time. And that works great. And actually, one of the sentences, they recommended that we remove the subordinate clause, which for level 1. And we had only been doing level 1 when it came to diagramming, but he felt confident with giving it a try, and he loved it. Like, he was so proud of himself for diagramming it correctly, and he diagrammed a compound sentence all on his own. It was great. So, yay. So that is what we do. That is how we supplement math and language arts, and that is our memory work. That is all you have to do. We do other things. We do add to our science, and we do add to our geography, but they're not heavy things. For example, one of the things we're going to add in next year will be for science, because we're going to be doing chemistry for the whole year. There is a periodic table coloring book, and it doesn't have all of the elements, but I think it has, I want to say, the first 5 rows. It ends up being about 80 elements, and it has a 2-page spread for each element, and it's a coloring page, but it's also an informational page. And so we're going to take that, and we're going to work on 2 or 3 elements a week, and we're going to Google them, and we're going to look up YouTube, and we're going to have fun with it. I also have a periodic table tile set. It's like a little game. It's super cheap. I want to say it was like 10 or 15 bucks on Amazon. Super cheap. And that is great for my little ones, because even if they couldn't care less about coloring that day, which doesn't happen often, but when it does, if they want to do tiles, I can have them working on something while my bigs are working on other things that are important. What else? Oh, yes, I wanted to show you. Yes, okay, so these are the draw books, and I love the draw books. The draw books are not super inexpensive. They're about $20 a piece, and there are several of them, but they're non-consumable. And with most of them, I've actually removed the binding, and I've put the pages into protective sleeves, and then I put the sleeves in a binder to keep them safe from my little monsters. My kids love these books, and next year, because we're doing cycle 3, and geography will be US and Canada, we're going to do, there's 2 different ones. We're going to do Draw the US, which has all of the US states, and then we're going to do Draw Canada and Greenland, which has the Canadian provinces as well as Greenland. And so the way they work is they have you start off with a small thing. Like, it's so cute. So they'll have you start with one small thing, and in this case, it's the Red Sea, and she describes it as a snail, I think, or no, a slug. She has you draw a slug, and then the next page has you add to it, and so each page, as you go, adds one more thing. So you just add in the red line. So in this case, the red line is the South Sudan, and you just keep going, and you keep going, and then eventually you have Africa, and it's a lot of fun. My kids love these books, and so we will probably do them once or twice a week next year. I would say we have sat down and done the entire book in one sitting. It's a lot, though. But there are times where we're like, oh, let's do another page. Oh, let's do another page. And all of a sudden we're like 90% of the way done, and it's just like, let's just finish it. So we do. But they're a lot of fun. Other things that we use, we use Story of the World. Love Story of the World. So Story of the World is a history program, and it is fantastic. It has 4 volumes, in the same way that Claritas has 4 cycles. In fact, Claritas, I suspect, was specifically written to correspond with Story of the World, and it is very much a world history program. It's fascinating to hear about Asia and Africa and South America and what was happening in other places of the world, and when you think about what's happening here at the same time as here, and it's fantastic. So it's a series of books. It's also activity books and tests. We don't do the tests. That's just not something we've ever felt the need to do. We do the tests in math, obviously, and we do one standardized test at the end of each school year, but we don't do tests for individual subjects other than math. But they do have the activity workbooks, and the kids enjoy those. The great thing about the activity workbooks is that there are coloring pages. So again, with the little ones, even during memory work time, I can keep them occupied with the activity pages and coloring. And there's like word scrambles and crosswords, and it's a lot of fun. And the books themselves are really well written. If your kiddos are little and you're kind of burned out on read aloud, the audio version of the books is fantastic. It's narrated by a man named Jim Weiss, and I cannot recommend him highly enough. My kids love that man. I think if they heard him like just out in public and he started talking, they'd recognize him, because we listen to so many of his books or so many of his stories. And actually, I would recommend looking at the library, because a lot of his stuff is available from the library in the audio, like books on CD. Usually if we go on a road trip or something, we'll go and pick up a bunch of Jim Weiss. And he does everything from like ancient history to fairy tales and just fascinating stories. I mean, he's done, I think he even did like Beowulf, and it's just crazy. He does all sorts of stories for kids, and he does it in such a fantastic way. So highly recommend him. The last thing would be, okay, so English, grammar, math, science. Yeah. So the last thing that we supplement is Latin. And I want to be very clear. I do not speak Latin. I have never been taught Latin. I have no desire to learn Latin. I'm fascinated by it. I think it's awesome. I think it's really good for my kids to learn, because if they ever go into law or medicine, that will be a great benefit to them. But we have supplemented in the past with a program called, I have it right here actually, sorry, Song School Latin, and it is fantastic. So this is book 2. So there's 2 books. There's level 1 and there's level 2, or book 1 and book 2. There's a workbook that comes with an audio CD. We don't really use the audio CD very much. And the first time we tried doing Song School Latin book 1, we didn't have the DVDs. That was a fail. It was a pretty massive fail, actually. So we restarted it, and we did it with the DVDs. The DVDs are really well produced. The monkey is fun. I think this company also does Song School Greek and Spanish and maybe something else. I don't think they do French, because I looked into that at one point. But I would also not recommend using the same company for multiple languages, just because it may get confusing. But anyway, yeah, so they do Song School Latin. I would say Song School Latin is great for the elementary ages. My son, they have another program from their company that is fantastic for middle schoolers. It also has DVDs. It's called Latin for Children, and we were supposed to start it this year, but then we built a house, and then we moved, and then the world crashed. So it hasn't happened. But he is a little too old for the Song School stuff. So I would say probably through 5th grade, maybe, for Song School 1 and 2. And you can repeat them. Our girls and our son have both done, I think, book 1 twice. And they've done book 2 once. But we'll probably do it one more time and then jump right into Latin for Children for him. Both programs you can go into with 0 experience beforehand. Both programs are also not very dependent on the parent, which is fantastic. And they do have answer guides, so whether you know Latin or not, you can still do it. And I think that is all of it. Oh my goodness, 40 minutes, holy buckets. So if you stayed for that whole time, God bless you. I hope that I explained it all as well as I could, and I hope that if you do decide to homeschool, you understand that you don't have to do any of the things that we're doing and still have a very successful year. But you will find what works for you. You will, I promise. It comes with time. And so just give yourself grace. And if you're pulling your kid from public school, give your kid grace too. Either way, give your kid grace too. And give yourself grace no matter what. Because there are days that it is not the best thing ever. But most of the time, almost all of the time, I would say it's the best decision we ever made. So, yeah, that's it.